into the floor. No, he thought, not that ship. This was literally the worst news he could have received, worse than being dismissed from the Corps. His parents might have gotten over that eventually, especially with the media on his side, but there was no excuse for this. The Endurance had a slew of nicknames among the United Earth Law Enforcement Corps. The Misfit, the Dead End, the Quacker Barrel, and the No I Quit Instead among them. It was the dumping ground for officers who had no business staying in the service, but who, for one reason or another, dispatch couldn't actually kick out. To keep them out of the way, the Endurance spent all of its time patrolling the area of empty space around Neptune and running a handful of off-the-wall science experiments. It never did anything. It never saved anyone. It never stopped any crimes. The only time it had been in the news in the past decade was when one of its officers won the lottery and retired. Nobody, with the exception of Jonah Davis, ever wanted to command it. That was the ship they were offering to him. And he had to take it. Ever since he was a boy, Thomas had dreamed of commanding his own ship, protecting civilians, fighting crime, and keeping space safe. He'd risen quickly through the ranks to lieutenant, and up until last week, he'd been the model officer. Then that mess with the uprising case went sideways, and his carefully constructed stack of cards came tumbling down. This would be his only chance to make captain. If he refused it, his career would stall out. Of course, if he took it, his career was probably over anyway. He swallowed and thought of the one thing that might possibly save his future. If I accept the Endurance command, can I have a chance to prove myself? Wen watched him with a frown. What do you have in mind? I've heard the stories. I know the sort of nonsense that crew is known for. If I whip them into shape, if I prove that I can maintain dispatch standards, will you let me transfer to a different ship? Thomas held his breath. The commissioner stared at him for a moment, then broke into a hearty laugh. If you can fix up that ship, then by all means, Withers, you can transfer to any ship in the fleet. Thomas wasn't sure if that was a real agreement or just outright mockery, but he would take what he could get. Then I accept the promotion, Commissioner. He hoped he hadn't just made the biggest mistake of his life. Thomas found his ship at the last airlock of the concourse. Though the outside was the same white metal as any other vessel, the rumors that circulated about the Endurance's interior, not to mention its crew, were enough to make even the most stoic captain cringe. He steeled himself. Now or never, Thomas. Taking a deep breath, he entered his authorization code into the airlock activation panel. It beeped twice, and its indicator light flashed red. Entry denied. So it began. Come on, Thomas muttered. He hadn't expected the problems to start until he was actually on board. He tried his code again, taking care to push each button correctly. Beep, beep. This is a joke, he decided. This has to be a joke. He looked around to see if anyone had noticed his embarrassment, but the area was deserted. Even if he wanted to ask for help, he couldn't. He turned back to the panel and entered the code again, speaking over each number. Work, you stupid piece of... Beep. The light flashed green, and the airlock slid open. Thomas blinked at the panel, then took in his first impression of the UELE Endurance. The entry corridor looked surprisingly normal. The white metal walls, the plain brown carpet, and the overhead light panels all seemed perfectly functional and perfectly standard among the United Earth Law Enforcement fleet. The corridor ran in both directions from the airlock, and the directional signs on the walls were both polished and mounted correctly. A whiff of the ship's air flooded through Thomas's sinuses. There was something musty in the odor, but it smelled breathable.